Welcome, everyone. I'm Bill Black, a speaker at Vistage Worldwide, and your moderator for today. I'm happy to host the latest webinar in our Peak Performer webinar series. This series is designed to support your leadership climb by bringing the most trusted experts to the Vistage community. Experts who provide exceptional insight and best practices, helping you navigate new challenges and possibilities. The most recent Vistage CEO Confidence Index survey revealed that 62% of small and mid-sized businesses are currently not able to operate at full capacity due to challenges hiring. And retention continues to be a challenge, with nearly a quarter of CEOs reporting decreased retention rates this year. The rise of the candidate-driven market and trends like the Great Resignation and quiet quitting have added to the recruiting and retention challenges employers face today. So we've invited Amy Ansira, Managing Director and VP of Recruiting at HireBetter, to address this important topic. Amy brings more than 20 years of experience serving in senior leadership roles in executive search, recruiting process outsourcing, organizational consulting, and strategic talent planning. HireBetter is on a mission to humanize the recruiting industry, recognized by Forbes as one of the America's best executive recruiting firms. HireBetter helps entrepreneurs scale their organizations with the right talent. As the leading growth matching firm in the nation, HireBetter provides retained search, executive search, project-based consulting, and strategic talent planning. Certainly a great resource for our CEOs. Welcome, Amy, over to you.
Thank you so much, Bill. I appreciate it. It's wonderful to be here with you all again. I just want to preamble with, I've had the flu for the past few days, so please forgive me. I apologize if I have to go on mute from time to time to clear my throat. But I'm honestly, as bad as I was feeling early in the week, the fact that I'm here today with a voice is pretty exciting to me. So thanks so much for having me. With that, why don't we jump into today's topic, which is recruiting and retention in the workforce revolution. I know from the workshops that we have the opportunity to teach that talent is on the minds of every single person that I talk to. And so recruiting and retention is really one of the more hot topics of the day. So happy to be here with you all and walk through this content. So to start with, what I'd like to outline is what we hope you will learn today. So our intention is, if I can get my slides to work, just one moment, that I want to talk about strategy. So for most of us, our talent strategies are outdated. I want to walk through what's changed and why. I'd like to walk through how we can implement new best practices to attract talent, to recruit them, to engage them, and ultimately to retain them. And then how to stay ahead of change to win the competition for talent long-term. So those are our topics for the day. Now, first, I want to talk about the most important concept that we engage in, and that is the concept that the future of business is human to human. We live in a highly technology-enabled world, but what we're finding more and more is that the humanized approach is really how we need to focus. The world looks vastly different than it did 3 years ago. I think we all know that. COVID and the mass return to home really changed everybody's lives dramatically across the globe. And we set into this world of working from home. We were all hustling to try to make sure that we stayed afloat, kept our businesses open, kept our doors open, and really found that people struggled quite a bit with balancing home, work, family, all those concepts around hustle culture. And there was a resulting change that happened from that around decision-making. And this is where we go into that human-to-human piece of it, because really the shift has been to meaning and purpose over paycheck. We see that more and more, that the paycheck is a means to an end, but what people are focused on really is meaning and purpose. And so the shift in the mindset of our workforce has been dramatic. People feel much more empowered to care for themselves, which I think is a good thing, and make what were formerly considered very radical decisions become more mainstream and normalized. We've seen, as Bill referenced, that there's been really a shift in the dynamics of power between employee and employer, and candidates, they have the choice now. And so we're really focused on how do we engage top talent. I think top talent will, for the long term, regardless of anything that happens from a financial or recessionary perspective, top talent will always be in a situation to make the choice. So we really want to re-gear how we're doing things to be focused more on the human to human and understanding what drivers are. So I mean this in a loving way, but most of us have an outdated talent strategy. Let's talk through, first and foremost, what's changed and why. I think that knowing that over the last 2.5, 3 years, so much of the world has changed, using your old methods for attracting and recruiting and retaining talent in this new world and expecting that there's going to be a different outcome or that you're going to have a leg up is truly the definition of insanity. Isn't that the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different outcome? We can't apply what we used to do to this new world and expect there to be a better outcome. So that forces us to change the way we're approaching our talent. So first and foremost, what's changed and why? First, it's really how we think about work. There's been a massive shift in the mindset of the workplace. And again, it's meaning and purpose. And meaning and purpose being in line with our long-term goals. People, I think, also are experiencing burnout and disengagement at unprecedented levels. So when we think about what changed from where we are now from 3 years ago, Deloitte did a survey of about 1,000 respondents, and 77% said that they've experienced burnout at their current job. 91% said that unmanageable stress or frustration was impacting the quality of their work. So that's a pretty significant number, that our work is being impacted by our stress levels at that higher rate. And then lastly, 83% said that it was negatively impacting their personal relationships. Burnout is impacting the nature of the relationships that we have, not just at work, but in our personal lives. We're also dealing with record low employment. Updated this month from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, we're at about 3.7% unemployment rate. And that's pretty low. We've been running around 3.5. So you can see with some of the micro things that have happened in the economy with regard to recessionary fears, we've gone from 3.5 to 3.7. So it's just a fairly small shift. We've got higher ratios or higher numbers of positions open with fewer people to fill those positions. I think Connor Lokar from ITR, our friend who speaks at most of our Vistage executive summits, shares, pretty much everyone that I've been to, that we're looking at roughly 10 to 11 million jobs at any given time, open jobs, and 0.6 people to fill those roles. That means we have a half a person for each of the open roles that we have. We've got experience gaps. So what we're seeing is that boomers and people are retiring and they're leaving the workforce and they're being replaced by younger folks that might not have the level of experience our outgoing talent is. So I've got a friend, I was at a party last weekend. She's newly in a role for a chemical company in Houston. She's a scientist, and her predecessor retired and left her a lab that she hasn't had any opportunity to onboard about. So she's had to go in and really try to figure it out on her own. And we're seeing a lot of that where there's not a knowledge transfer. And so we're having these gaps of experience that are impacting our work and our teams. And then lastly, generational differences. We teach a workshop on behalf of Vistage, and one of the pages that I go back to in our workbook over and over is, I'm going to read to you. Boomers tend to value loyalty and money over career specifics or advancement, in contrast to millennials who typically and Gen Z who value innovation, collaboration, progressive equality, activism and pragmatism. Those are pretty diametrically opposed. And so you think about, as an organization, as a company, and as a leader, you're trying to build a company with different generations who have different things that matter to them on a macro level. So those are some of the things that have changed as well. And, I know we've all talked about these kind of the workforce revolution and the different things that we're seeing from a work-related trends. We've got the Great Resignation, we've got anti-work, quiet quitting, the concept of proximity bias. All of these are trendy terms that are been pushed by the media, and each of them, accordingly has a different opinion attached to it. But they point to the larger underlying issue of disengagement and burnout. Workers, for the most part, are checked out. I had a conversation with somebody I know recently, and he was telling us about somebody we know in common who started a new job, and he loved the job. I said, "Oh yeah, well, talk to me about that job. What's so great?" "Well, they're not very busy," he said, "and he can take a nap in the middle of the day." And I was shocked at the concept of taking a nap in the middle of the day, and that being the definition of a great job. But that points to this level of disengagement and burnout. Workers, for the most part, are checked out. Just 1/3 of workers reported feeling engaged on the job. That's according to a recent Gallup survey. And that's even lower than in 2020. That's a pretty significant data point, in my opinion. What's more, about 60% of respondents reported feeling emotionally detached at work. So we're checked out and we're not emotionally plugged in. That's a pretty significant thing to think about. So knowing these things that are driving the market, knowing what's changed and some of the why, how can we implement new best practices to attract, to retain, to recruit, to engage talent? How can we start to shift our thinking? So first and foremost, I want to talk to you about a concept called growth matching. And it's something that we see over and over and over in the entrepreneurs that we work with. Entrepreneurs that engage in this concept of growth matching, they typically have higher rates of sustained growth for longer periods of time. And it's because they grow and scale with a people-first approach. Now, what does that mean? First and foremost, it's about aligning your talent strategy with your business growth. So taking and mapping those two together. Now, according to a recent predictive index report on the state of talent optimization, which is fascinating, and I would encourage you all to take a look at it because it's got some really, really interesting trends. Only 31% of companies say that their business and talent strategies are aligned. Only 31% of the businesses that were polled, and it was a large number, have an aligned business and talent strategy. And we know from the course of the work that we do that companies that optimize and engage in this growth matching, they're nearly twice as likely to avoid the brunt of the Great Resignation than their peers were. So if talent is our number one issue, then why are only 30% of us aligning our business and our talent strategy? It begs a pretty big question. So number one, aligning your talent strategy, making sure you have one outlined and aligning that to your business growth. Number two is really considering your current realities. What are the current realities of the market? What are the things that we're trending? What can we be strategic about? Again, it's understanding the time to hire is going to be significantly greater because we do have such a constriction in the market. Again, half a person roughly for each open role. So companies that are really realistic and understand the realities of the market tend to do much better. Again, then there's the next thing, which is assessing your current teams. So we have the benefit of having these people that are standing behind us that have worked for us for years, months, however long it's been, and really understanding what does the makeup of that team look like? How does that align to my talent strategy? And then who can I upskill? Who can I develop cross-functionally? Assessing your current teams and being strategic about how you approached your people is another part of this growth matching concept that we've seen success with year and year after year. And lastly, it's about a humanized recruiting process that puts the candidate first. So implementing a recruiting process that really understands that we're talking to people who are juggling a lot of different things. They're juggling an interview process, a job that they're working in, family, responsibilities. So making sure that we have a humanized recruiting process is central to this concept of growth matching. So then how do we do this? How do we implement these best practices to attract and recruit talent? In the workshops that I teach, you can ask anybody who's a participant in those. The thing that I hammer in over and over and over is core values. Core values cannot be understated, the importance of them in your hiring process. So first and foremost, it's about making your core values central to your hiring process. Your core values can attract the right person, but almost, or maybe more importantly, they will repel the wrong people. So making your core values central to the hiring process is critical. Next is understanding that your brand matters. You only maybe have 10 seconds to hook somebody, to hook a candidate in the interview process or in the attraction process. And so understanding that your brand has an impact, making sure that it properly aligns your website, your job descriptions, online reviews, your careers page, making sure that it outlines your core values as well. Knowing that your brand matters is central to being able to attract and recruit the right talent. Creating inclusive position descriptions is also critical. There's a statistic that I came across years ago, and it still holds true, and it's shocking. And I try to share it with everybody I meet because I do think it is so important. And that is that in a job description, if a woman doesn't meet 100% of the requirements for the role, let's say, must have 10 years of experience in project management, et cetera, really the key things that we outline is needed for a role, they won't even apply unless they meet 100% of the criteria. In contrast to a man who, if he meets around 40% of the requirements, he's going to apply. And I find that to be a fascinating statistic, but also a really important one when we think about trying to bring on talent. I would encourage you all, if you have not yet, to look at a study that was recently done by Lean In and McKinsey. And it ties in this concept of the great breakup, where we're seeing that women leaders are leaving at very fast rates, in fact, much faster than their male counterparts. So if we care about the makeup of our teams and trying to attract more women into our organizations, embracing inclusive position descriptions is really part of that picture. Lastly, it's about understanding what does the day-to-day look like? What is the realistic picture for a role that somebody's going to step in? Why does it matter to the company, to the team, to society? Again, people are continually voting for purpose over paycheck. And it's about embracing that heart-based human-to-human approach. So implementing a people-first process. So how do we implement them? Develop your core values that are core, and know what they are before you hire. I had the benefit of working with a wonderful client by the name of Andy, who took on a leadership role at an air purifier company just before COVID hit. And he came in and recognized that the culture was broken, and largely because they had not done any foundational work around their core values. And he was able to do that work. And as a result, they thrived during the pandemic and really culturally thrived. So taking the time to develop your core values is important. Next is conducting an audit. I always encourage people, if you don't know what your online presence is, or you're not tuned into that, conduct the audit. So make sure that you have your marketing person, revisit the website, look at your job reviews. Look at all of the things that are an outside presence of you to a job seeker, and have your HR person revisit your careers page. Look at the job descriptions and really make sure that you're auditing your online presence so that you're putting your very best foot forward, because again, you only have 10 seconds to hook somebody. Next is about human to human. So when we think about training and developing our hiring managers, we need to understand that most people, unless they've worked in a rotational program or a large company or an organization that values training and developing of managers, most managers don't necessarily know how to manage. They've been thrust into a position of management, but they might not have the practical skills to do so. So helping your people develop the framework for how to manage is one portion of that. But the other is training them around that concept of emotional intelligence. You know, we hear this over and over and over about EQ. It's kind of the term of the day. In this environment, in this world, in this workforce, having leaders that have developed EQ and can have conversations that are deeper is one of the best things that you can do to make sure that you bring on the right people and keep them. Ensuring that those core values that you've developed are a bottoms up exercise instead of a tops down exercise. I've seen instances where leadership or a PE firm hands down core values from on high and tries to push them down into the organization. And it doesn't typically work because it's not truly indicative of the culture and the core values. So making sure that you're developing that as a bottoms up process, and then making sure that you cascade them down through all of the managers you hire, through everybody that you bring onto the team, so that they are lived and they are believed and they're celebrated. And then conducting interviews as a mutual conversation. Again, when we think about that 0.6 people for every open job, people have choices. They have a lot of choices, and don't kid yourself into thinking that your current employees are not getting multiple calls a day for new opportunities, or that the applicants or the people that you're interviewing right now aren't interviewing in multiple places. So your ability to conduct the interview as a mutual conversation, again, personalized, heart to heart, human to human, those are going to be the things that help you in implementing and bringing on the right talent. So then we shift, now that we've talked about how do we recruit and attract, we shift to what do we need to do to engage and retain. And again, this is where we talk about the importance of building very strong cultures and having values that are inspiring and that are lived. So if you have this core value set developed, really living them every day and ensuring that they're not just words on a wall is one of the ways that you can retain people. Because again, if we're looking at meaning and purpose and connectedness, having that connection to core values and culture is key to retaining people, to keeping them on board. Creating meaning and purpose and building work for people that is purposeful is important. Giving people that opportunity to do something that's bigger than themselves. Prioritizing your people. This is about building trust and having deep conversations about personal and professional growth of your team, and creating opportunities to understand what matters for each individual and how you can develop your people to their highest desire. Ideally, people will stay with you, but regardless, as a manager or a leader, it's your role and it's your responsibility and it's your honor to be able to help develop people to their highest desire. So this is where I want to talk about the how do we do it? What are the concrete things, the practical things that we can do to get started? I've had some workshop participants who said, oh, I'm not doing any of this. I don't even know where to start. And then it runs the spectrum to people who they're completely on top of it. It really just depends where you're at in your journey. But if this isn't something that you're doing yet, the fastest, easiest way to start is the concept of the stay interview. I've got a great article that I wrote about this. I'd be happy to share it with any of you. I think it might also be on LinkedIn. But the concept of the stay interview is something that you can do today. You can go schedule it today, tomorrow, next week, immediately. And it's really about understanding what matters to the people who are on your team. This is not about interviewing new people. It's about the people who are loyal to you and still on your team, and understanding why are they still on their team, on your team. What are the things that they love about their job that fire them up and tap into their highest and best use? What are the things that they have in their role that are frustrations? It could be people, processes, technology, any number of things. So understanding what are the positives and the negatives, and what is it that somebody ultimately wants to do? What do they want to grow into? How can you help them along that journey? And it's most importantly understanding if somebody were going to leave, why? Why would you leave? If somebody were to call you with a job opportunity, and instead of hanging up the phone, you took the call, what would be the thing that would make you take the call and make the move? And it's going to be different for every person. For some, it could be compensation. For others, it could be title. It could be the type of work that you're doing, the location that you're doing that work from. It could be getting away from a bad manager. There are a million different reasons that people decide to stay and decide to go. And you can't encourage people to stay if you don't know the why of why they stay. So engaging in those stay interviews is important. I encourage those stay interviews to be not something that you do at the office. Grab that individual, go grab coffee, go get lunch, go outside of the office and engage in a personal conversation so that you better understand what motivates that person. From there, the next thing that you can do, if you're not doing it, is engage in regular weekly touch bases. So really having those conversations with your team that continue to build that level of trust and connectedness. And next, it's about quarterly one-on-ones. You've had the one stay interview, and that's great. And you're having these weekly one-on-ones, but you need to have that opportunity to have a deep check-in with your team members to understand how are they doing? How are they feeling? This is your opportunity. Again, you go off-site, someplace that's not the office, but it's you ask questions and then you quiet, you zip your mouth and you take note of what's important, what's working and what's not working, because this is an opportunity for your teammate to express how they're feeling. And it's an opportunity for you to right size anything that you need to right size. So next topic is really how do we stay ahead of change to win the competition for long-term talent long-term, excuse me. First and foremost, it's about the concept of the type of team that you build. So we have a term in our organization called the dynamic disruptor. And what that means to us is people who are driven, they're collaborative, they're expansive thinkers. They are people who think outside the box. And if you're in Vistage, you're a business leader, chances are this is you. This is who you are, and this is who you want to hire. So building a team around you of people who think differently and think outside the box is one of the ways that you win the competition for talent long-term, because people want to join other like-minded people who are doing interesting, exciting, important things. So making sure that you're building a team around you that are doing those things is important. Creating a culture of open communication to me is about, again, embracing that human to human and creating opportunities where people can come to you and you can have honest discourse. Staying on top of talent trends and anticipating change is another way that you win the competition for talent long-term. This is a dynamic market. I've been saying that for the past 2.5 years. I keep saying this is the most dynamic market for talent I've ever seen in almost 25 years of experience, only served in the talent industry. So I've worked in talent my entire career, and I've never seen a market for talent like this. And it's requiring us to adapt and be nimble at an unprecedented rate. Your ability to stay informed on talent trends is critical to this. So what does that mean? Reading employment reports, reading reports like the PI State of Talent Optimization and the McKinsey Lean In or .org report. Talking to experts, talking to people who have expertise in the field of talent and what are the trends that are happening right now. Asking your fellow members of Vistage is a great resource for what are the indicators of what's going on in talent right now. And also asking your people, your hiring managers, your HR, what they're seeing. What are the trends that they're seeing? Understanding those trends is really what's going to help you win the competition for long-term talent. And ultimately, when you have that information, you're going to need to be creative and nimble and adaptable to stay ahead of change. Targeting and developing internal potential. We've talked about this in a couple of different instances, but really you have a team of people behind you that are loyal and they want to work with you. And some of those people might not yet be at a place where they can step into a role, but being able to see that raw talent and develop those people for other internal potential positions is another way that you win the competition for long-term talent. You think about the cost of acquiring new talent and how much effort and time and energy goes into that. But you've got internal talent that you can develop. And a lot of those things, those spends can be reallocated to development rather than to the recruitment process. There's another concept that I am very passionate about, probably as passionate about as core values development, and that is the concept of hire for what you can't teach. And hiring for what you can't teach goes hand in hand with your core values. And what I mean by that is I can teach somebody how to recruit. I can teach somebody how to jockey a spreadsheet. I can send them to a class on how to learn a software. There are a million skill sets that are learnable, but core values and soft skills like grit and integrity, those are things that you can't teach. So when you see those things in people, be willing to take a chance. And that dovetails with our last bullet around being proactive, not reactive. If you've done the work to really understand your core values and you've done the work to outline your talent strategy, if you see people that you might not be ready to hire them right now, or you didn't plan on hiring them right now, but they're in front of you right now, be proactive. Go ahead and make that hire, understanding that you're staying ahead of the curve. This is how you compete for talent long term. So our to-dos are pretty clear, and I want to talk through these, and then we have some time to go through Q&A. I like to leave a little bit more time for Q&A just because sometimes the questions are a little bit longer. So number one, first and foremost, is around the development of your talent strategy. If you have a talent strategy update or developed, make sure you're updating it, and that's a living document, and you're constantly making sure that it's up to speed. But if you don't have a talent strategy defined, you really need to define that and make sure that it dovetails with your business growth. So what that looks like is these are the roles that we need to hire. Here are the gaps that we have that we need to think about. And what are the timeframes for the people that we need to hire? When do we need to make these hires? Please, again, remember that the talent market is so constricted right now. We've got 0.6 people for every open job. And if you're looking at hiring an executive, C-level or VP level, that's easily a 90 to 120 day search. If you're looking at somebody that is director level and below, those people are probably 75 to 90 days. So if you know what your talent strategy is and you know what your roadmap is and when you need to hire people, this proactive part of backing into it from your talent strategy, that's going to help you stay ahead of the curve with regard to your talent roadmap. Next is re-engaging your team to build the right culture. Core values development and really communicating often with your team about your core values and how you live them and what the nature of your culture is another kind of immediate to do that you can engage in if you're not already. And then the last is really around developing your internal potential. So you've got, again, a team of people behind you that are loyal, and they're working with you, they care. Use the stay interview. to understand why they're still here and how you can develop them and really manage to core values. Your core values are an attractor or a repeller, but I also encourage people, don't just use them in the interview process, use them to manage, use them to hire, use them to fire, use them as your guiding light and all that you do. They are your North Star. So with that, we will move to Q&A.
Terrific. Thank you, Amy. Great presentation. We have a few questions in from listeners. We're going to move towards those questions, and we encourage you, if you have questions, please submit those with the Q&A panel at the bottom of your screen. First question for you is that one of our participants asked if you could please read the millennial/Gen Z values once again.
Absolutely.
So we can get clear on those.
Yes, absolutely. And again, this is according to the Harvard Business Review. Boomers, baby boomers, tend to value loyalty and money over career specifics or advancement. Gen X, which is my generation, and this totally aligns with me. When I read this, I said, yep, that's absolutely correct, values ownership and autonomy. We want to be able to make mistakes and have freedom and own what we're doing. Millennials value innovation, collaboration, freedom, experiences, and creativity. And Gen Z values progressive equality, conscious consumerism, activism, and pragmatism. That's some pretty different trends from generation to generation. What part, and this is just an aside, part of the things that I've heard from a lot of younger people in millennial and Gen Z generation is, I watched my parent or parents sacrifice their lives on the altar of their work, and I don't want to live that way. I don't want to do that. I don't want that for my life. So I think that might be some of the behavior that's pushing that some of those differences in what matters, what's the value of different generations.
Thank you. And Amy, you mentioned early on the need to update one's talent strategy and reiterated that importance again. Do you do this on a yearly basis, quarterly, or how frequently?
Yeah, that's probably something that we do annually. So we have an offering which is strategic talent planning. It's basically facilitated sessions, and what we propose for our clients when we're engaging in these exercises is have the top 1 or 2 people in the room that really are focused on the company long-term and the long-term success of the company, meaning they don't have a fiefdom they're trying to protect or anything along those lines. Make sure you have those people in the room, have it be facilitated by somebody who can help you think through your people and your gaps and where the company is growing. You do an assessment of the different functional areas within the organization, so sales, marketing, accounting, finance, operations, et cetera, to understand, if I want to go from here to here in the next 3 years, do I have the people in place that can drive that growth? If they can't help you get from here to here, it's not to say that there's not a place for them at the company. It just means you don't have the leader that you need within that function. And so that helps you figure out part of your talent strategy. And then you fill in the gaps from there. One of the, what we suggest that people do those annually, but we also go back and revisit them on a quarterly basis, because as we all know, business is changing at such a rapid pace that the way that we're budgeting and forecasting looks completely different over the last 3 years than it has ever in business history. So make sure that you're iterating on that, and that the what's happening in your business is still applicable to that plan.
Thank you. And a lot of questions coming in. Keep those questions coming in, listeners. We'll try to get to all of these during this great session here. Amy, during the interview process, what's the best practice for number and or length of interviews? I'm a smaller business, and it seems that lately I have to interview fast and offer, or I lose the candidate.
Yep, absolutely. So I'll give you a range. A lot of the people that we talk through as part of the executive series for Vistage, which happen on a citywide basis, or the workshops that we're talking with, if they are companies that are hiring hourly workers, they often have to interview, hire, start, and pay on the same day in order to win that talent. So they've had to get so much, there's so much competition in that at that level, that if you're not doing those things, that typically you're not winning that talent. And even if you do those things, there's a good chance that person might not show up on day 2 or day 3 because they might make a move for 50 cents more. There's a lot of dynamic things that are happening at that level, all the way to what I would say for an executive level hire and a non-executive level hire. Executive being C-level or VP level, if you're not working with a search firm, I would say you're probably going to keep it to 3 to 4, right? One of those interviews being an exercise to understand how they would solve a problem in their practical area and the area of function that they're working in. So as the executive, as the leader, I would suggest that you're typically the first point person, because if they're going to report into you, you want to make sure that you have good rapport, that there's the right connection there from the front end. And then you would involve other applicable people from the C-suite to help assess, and then do that exercise like we talked about. If it's a non-executive role, meaning director level and below, the more junior to director that you get, you're absolutely right that the pace of interviewing happens so quickly, and it's because they're entertaining multiple offers and multiple interview processes. And so it's in this market, it's almost the concept of he who acts fastest wins, right? So you're seeing that people are getting gobbled up pretty quickly. So I would say that what you need to focus on is making sure that your interviews are getting you the information that you need to be able to make that decision as quickly as possible. I would say 2, and where you need to be paying attention really is the timing and not letting there be long gaps between interviews. So this is about communication. It's about keeping the process moving at a good steady clip so that you're getting the information you need, but it's moving quickly for the candidate.
Terrific. Here's another interview related question. What is your go-to question to ask during an interview?
For me, it's always the behavioral interviews, the behavioral questions. So where, again, not to go back to core values, but I always hammer back core values as being so important. For me, I like to outline core values in my very initial first interview, because I want to understand, are we aligned or are we not aligned? And then it becomes, tell me about a time when, right? Tell me about a time when. So one of our core values is grit. And it's the way that we describe and define grit is running into the storm. So you don't just have a word, you have a word and a description of what does that mean. So running into the storm, you could run away from it because it's hard and it's messy, but no, you have a nature of running into the storm. So I'll ask a question about, tell me about a time when you had a difficult situation with a client, and elaborate on a situation and get them to tell me about what they did, how they handled it, what the handoffs were, how they felt, how did they handle it differently the next time. It's really trying to get to that. Can they tell me real life examples of how they've exhibited that thing prior and what it meant to them and what they learned from it?
Thank you. Engagement and retention of employees is a huge problem at our company. What are the top 3 impactful actions I can take? I know you listed many, but wondered your favorites based on your company's experience.
My first, the most impactful to me is, again, going back to that stay interview. I think that if you have a high rate of people leaving, understanding why. First of all, you want to stem the bleeding. So you want to make sure that whoever is still with you stays, and understand why they're here. And if there's anything that you need to do to immediately remedy a situation for somebody that's on your team, think of that as almost like triage, right? The stay interview it's informative, but if you are in a situation where you do have something going on at a greater level, you want to triage the problem right away. So first and foremost is do those stay interviews, understand where everybody's head's at on an individual basis and what you need to do to stem the bleeding. And then I think, I don't know if you are engaging in this or not, but exit interviews are very important. So understanding when people are leaving, why did they leave? what was the thing that they were leaving from? What was the situation? It could be a manager, it could be a workload. There's a million things, but you can't fix it if you don't know what it is. So engaging in exit interviews. And then I think also it's about taking like little pulse points. So to the degree that you can do employee polls to understand where you have maybe problems that are popping up, that are small problems right now that you need to have on your radar. That's another way that you can address that issue.
Can you reiterate a favorite employment reports and maybe let us know where can we find those types of reports?
Yeah, absolutely. So the one that I was referencing that I was very impressed with most recently is by a company called Predictive Index. Many of you are probably familiar with PI. They have a really wonderful assessment tool that we use. They put out a report called the State of Talent Optimization. And talent optimization is the same concept as growth matching from the perspective of it's being more strategic about your talent. And so that's a wonderful, it was just released in the last couple of months, I think. That's a wonderful recent report that covers everything from non-executive to executive levels and all the trends for employment and why people are moving, and giving some of the reasoning. So that's a really great one. I'm just digging into the one that was McKinsey and leanin.org. So that's a report that they've developed and put out over the past 5 years that talks about some of the trends for the female workforce. So I think that's another one that's a really valuable one as well. And then obviously I always go back to like unemployment reports and open jobs reports and some of those things to understand what are the trends that are happening.
Terrific. Are you seeing differences in various regions of the country? For instance, how do things differ in the Northeast versus other areas of the U.S.?
From a ability to recruit people, or is there any?
Yeah, I believe in context to your presentation. Yes.
Yeah. So I think we have the benefit of working across the country. We're industry agnostic. We work in 3 primary areas. So it's the areas that every company has to have: sales and marketing, operations, HR, accounting and finance. It's the foundational things. What we're seeing is that across the country at the executive level, there's a lot more opportunity for remote work, which was really interesting to me because I wouldn't have thought that would be the case. But it seems as though senior level executives are recognizing that regardless of location, you can still do a great job from anywhere. And, there's different ways to find balance there. So that's one of the things that I think has been interesting to see is more openness to that. I would say that in a lot of cases, there are organizations that do not want to recruit from California. And I hate saying that because my partner in crime at HireBetter, Velvet Schmitz, is a native to California, but there are a lot of companies that really have a lot of nervousness about having employees in California, New York, New Jersey, just because of some of the employment law and some of that's sensitive. So we're seeing that. And then I think I haven't seen anything trending in terms of ability to hire people across different geographies. It seems as though that difficulty in finding people is across the board. What I will tell you is, we have become a remote workforce. People are more reticent to go into the office. We've seen that across the board everywhere. We are seeing more recently, and I would say this is maybe starting around the time of I don't know, maybe 6 months ago or something like that. And it could be tied to recessionary things. It could be tied to global conflict or world conflict, but people are not wanting to physically move. So if we have opportunities or clients that need to relocate somebody from another geography, we're having to feed probably a third more people at the top of the funnel, meaning we have to reach out to a third more people to get the same number of candidates. And it's just people are much more nervous about making a move right now, just given some of the dynamics that are at play in the world.
Yeah, and that feeds right into our next question, which is what else are you seeing with employees being forced to return to an office after having been remote?
It's interesting because I think executives, leaders want people back in the office because they recognize that we have that ability to connect and idea share and build culture and all those things. By and large, the employee base is saying, nope, I really don't want to do it, except with a few exceptions. Most people really want to stay remote. And when they're forced to be in the office, they're changing jobs. They're voting with their feet. So we're seeing in instances where there is not flexibility around coming into the office, at least a hybrid model, that people are making job changes. And again, it's, they've got more time with their families, they feel like more work-life balance. And so the employee right now is in charge.
Amy, what's the most common recruiting mistake you notice?
Well, I would say there's probably two. One of those is using an assessment as a knockout tool, meaning not looking at the person as a whole person and only relying on an assessment, is one that I'd caution people against, because we're all complex beings. We go back to this human to human. You're not an algorithm. You have a lot of different things you show up with. And so I caution against that. The other is, it goes back to that timeliness, like understanding the current realities of the market. 0.5 people, lots of companies that are wanting to hire, and knowing that the person that moves the fastest wins. So it's about building a process that makes sense in terms of a timeline, but then also the communication piece of it. I so often companies will take too long to, they won't give feedback, or they won't schedule a next interview, or they won't, whatever it is, they don't communicate appropriately with the candidate. And then the candidate, they get the message that they're not important, and somebody else cares about them more because they are communicating in a better way, and they make their decision in that way. So if that makes sense.
Couple more questions. We still have some time for other questions if you want to put those in the Q&A at the bottom. This is a bit of a long one, Amy, so take a breath.
Okay.
Okay. I've had success in our all remote / virtual work environment with hiring, onboarding, and retaining employees with experience. But we're struggling with training and coaching people right out of school. In an IRL environment, there are constant touch points and learning by osmosis, but that does not exist in an all virtual environment. And they're flagging in terms of task completion and staying tethered. Okay, so the question is, what are your thoughts on this? And could you comment on training and coaching people right out of school?
It's interesting because this is a conversation that our CEO and I have had a lot in reference to one of his kids is a recent college graduate in his first position. And we were talking about our experience, our similar experience at the same age, where we were learning by osmosis. We were sitting elbow to elbow and, going to lunch and getting socialization and having somebody come, the value of somebody looking over your shoulder and going, oh no, don't do it that way, do it that way. Like if you hit this key or do this thing. And you're right, it's this remote environment is causing you think about it all the way down to our kids and what happened to our small kids. I had a kindergartner when COVID first happened who was masked, and you think about your ability to learn when you've got two arms tied behind your back. It's without a doubt, it is an issue that people are having developmental learning lags, emotional learning lags, social lags. All of those things are happening as a result of a remote environment. And so in the instances where you can have a partial remote, so having somebody come into the office 2 or 3 days a week, I think that's one way to combat it. If you have the ability, and if our company is dispersed across the country, in fact, across the globe, and so we don't have the opportunity for maybe satellites, but if you had the ability to build some satellite situations where people could come in, I would think that would be one way to do it. There are some online training platforms that I think that you can put in place, but I don't know that is a substitute for sitting shoulder to shoulder with somebody or taking a lunch. So.
Looks like we have one more question for you, Amy. Do you have a pre-employment survey tool? I know you'd mentioned predictive index and whatnot before, but do you have a pre-employment survey tool that you would recommend? I'm referring to a test or survey that a prospective employee might take as part of the interview process.
So a skills test, is it the skills test like along the lines of like a Excel skills or basic skills along those lines? If that's the case, there's a lot of those. And I have if you want to send me, my contact information is at the bottom, amy.ansir@hirebetter.com. If you want to send me an email, I'm happy to push some of those your way, because my colleague's done a ton of research into those types of tools. From a survey, how is the interview process going? I don't know of any of those, but again, I think that part of that needs to be done. Again, if we're looking at human to human, the conversation that I have whenever I'm interviewing somebody to join my team is, how are you feeling, and who do you need to meet next? What information do you need to have next in order to make a decision, in order to move the path forward? So again, it's knowing everything needs to be so personalized, and that different things matter to different people. I would tend to want to, where possible, rely on a human touch rather than a survey.
Amy, on behalf of our audience, thank you so much for sharing your insights, and any final comments for us?
Thank you so much for being here with me. I'm always available to answer any questions. My email is at the bottom, or I think there might be an opt-in possibility as well. So if there's any additional information that any of you needs, I'm happy to talk through that and be a resource for you. We've also got a workshop that we conduct on behalf of Vistage on creating the culture of tomorrow. So if that's something that's of interest as well, happy to talk through that.
Thank you. And thank you to all of our participants. We'll be sending a link to today's recording and slides 24 hours from now. Also, be sure to join us throughout the rest of the month at 2 can't miss webinars. First, we have Mindset 2.0, Making Hard Things Easier, with Dr. Eve Macheda on Friday, November 11th. And then for our members, we have Rod Ishog from the U.S. Chamber coming to Vistage for an exclusive discussion about the impact of the midterm elections for SMBs on Friday, November 18th. You can register for these sessions now at vistage.com/webinar. That's vistage.com/webinar. Also, please plan to join us for our next virtual National CEO Conference, Business Growth, on December 9th, featuring Shark Tank's Barbara Corcoran and innovation expert Martin Lindstrom. More information is available on these at vistage.com/growth 2022. That's vistage.com/growth 2022. Thanks so much, everyone, and be well.
Thanks.